Yeah.
Zanetta,
We'll go. Okay. Yep.
go in the middle, Zanetta. Yeah. Dirk, you're here beside me, I
Okay,
think.
I'm
Yeah.
here. Thank you.
And Daniel. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Dirk, I think you might have to leave a bit early.
In an hour.
Okay,
exactly.
good.
So
Okay.
if we stick to that clock, then we're fine.
Yes, we have a fine big clock. So I just want to say welcome to everybody. I'll start just by introducing the speakers. We've got Zanetta Vignerev, Deputy Head of Cabinet from the Dombrovskis Cabinet, whose mandate includes simplification, productivity, efficiencies, etc. From the European Parliament, we've got Dirk Gotnik, EPP Group, NSC from the Netherlands, I think Vice Chair of the Special Committee on Housing and a big, supporter of the single market and what we can do to make it better. From academia, we all know Daniel Gross from his time with CEPS here in Brussels. He's now at the University of Bocconi in Milan. And I would say one of Europe's most respected macro economists. And finally, from the entrepreneurial trenches, we've got Peter Westerbacke, serial entrepreneur, founder of Slush, which is the biggest event for startup venture capital in Europe, based in
the world.
In the world,
Yeah.
excuse
Let's
me.
not be modest Europeans.
Yes, and Peter is, I have to say, was also the driving force behind the Angry Birds franchise with Rovio, my daughter's favorite movie. So she'll be very, very impressed that you were on the panel today. I just want to start by saying, because we only have, according to the clock, 58 minutes, this is not going to be a panel lamenting the last 20 years and how we perceive ourselves as falling behind the United States and China and stuff like that. I feel like if we spent half as much time trying to get the solutions rather than talking about what Washington thinks about us, we'd be a lot further along the way to where we need to go. So we're really just going to talk about two questions. How do we get more growth and productivity into the European economy? And two, we need to talk about the politics of that, because in a lot of contexts, the economics is quite, if not simple, at least there's a lot of agreement on what the big macro issues that need to be done. But it's politics, it's political will that really, nothing can happen without that. But I want to start to provide, kind of a concrete example. It's to kind of show where we actually are today. And that is, it was a headline from the Financial Times last week. And I'm quoting directly: companies swamped by 3,000 hours of paperwork to tap EU climate funds. Of the 7.1 billion euros awarded from the bloc's flagship innovation programme for clean tech, only 5% has been paid out. And that Clean Innovation Fund was established in 2021. So it kind of highlights, the impediments. We heard this morning from Ann Mettler that, the EU tender for improving electricity grids in Europe, for those who apply, it's 23,000 pages long. So Zanetta, I will come to you first. Your commissioner has a very clear mandate, very clear objectives. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, what are the three real kind of priorities that you're going to be focusing on in the coming years?
Well, here, first of all, thanks a lot for inviting me, and pleasure to see such eminent speakers to discuss these topics. First of all, I would like to zoom out a little bit and say, let's say, three perhaps priorities we should attend to. One is definitely hard security, because without hard security, you also don't have stability and predictability for doing business. And that includes support to Ukraine. Second, of course, you already mentioned political will to go to push through very ambitious competitiveness agenda. And there, indeed, you have many components. You already mentioned a very important component, which is bettering our regulatory environment. And actually, it's quite cheap. All you need is real political will. It doesn't cost a lot. Secondly, I think we have to, when we speak about competitiveness, we have to remember old good projects, such as deepening single market, bringing down barriers in the single market. So maybe simply making it easier for companies to do business in the single market. And then we also have to always remember that we've been talking a lot about capital markets union, about access to capitals, but this is exactly where we are at huge disadvantage in comparison to the US and also China. The third, maybe new policy work stream is what we call the economic security, because in this more fragmented, more power-based world, we also have to learn to assert ourselves, assert our interest, meaning European interest. And I would say even learn to speak the language of power, which is somehow counterintuitive to Europe because we operate by consensus. So this is the whole economic security agenda. It comes into like kind of giving us toolbox, but also more strategic use of those tools to defend our interest, while not losing our partners and like-minded countries that still want to cooperate with us and still want to trade with us. And trade is, of course, our force.
And it's a big, just a quick follow-on, it's a big kind of almost a psychological shift that's required in Europe, a cultural shift to go from, you know, very consensus-based 27, 28 leaders around a big council table to, you know, something which is a lot more pragmatic and a lot more kind of willing to push ahead, even if not all 27 agree.
I agree. And also you need cultural and behavior shift also to change from bureaucracy culture into kind of anti-bureaucracy culture. That's also a cultural shift that we need to achieve.
Yes, exactly. Dirk, if I could come to you, what is kind of the view from the European Parliament? We hear a lot of talk at the moment about simplification, but what does that mean from your perspective, and what do you think that should mean from an EPP perspective?
Well, I think that simplification is an important part of the agenda, but I don't think, we would be fooling ourselves if we think that the European economy is going to be significantly changed only by changing some rules on the deforestation regulation or by simplifying some tweaks in legislation. Yeah. It was mentioned, the Capital Markets Union. We've been talking about it for 10 years. Everybody knows what needs to be done. And the real question is, do the key member states where the financial markets are deepest, are they willing to jump into the cold water together? Yeah. And that comes at a price of control, of national sovereignty, they would call it back home. But in a world of geopolitical shocks, we need stronger barriers to protect our economy. So the deeper financial markets, energy markets, second one, very important. If we want competitiveness in Europe, we need to get energy prices down. And if that means the Commission needs to massively invest in nuclear, then hell, do it. But we need to move forward. And at some point also, if the governance structure of 27 is unsuitable to make progress on the financial markets, for example, because the dominant narrative that we are now talking about most of the time, also when we look at the MFF, for example, the multi-financial framework, it's how we distribute among each other. We're talking way more about distributing what we have than we do about making more money.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
If you go to the US, they think about making money, and then they talk about how we're going to distribute that. And so we've got it all the other way around.
Yeah.
And I think if we do not change, and maybe that's the behavioral, the cultural thing that really needs to change, because the cake is getting smaller. And if we want to avoid getting into permanent conflicts with each other about a decreasing size of the cake, we have to work on making the cake bigger. And for that, crucial is deeper financial markets and lowering our energy prices. And if we get that done, this mandate, then this would be a success. But only the omnibuses will not be enough.
Yeah, it's interesting that like the basis of, over the last 50 years of the EU's wealth, of the EU's affluence, has been the single market. And it's interesting how, for whatever political or economic reasons, I think there's certainly a perception in the centre right that it wasn't afforded the level of, the level of concentration that it should have been over the last 10 or 20 years. Daniel, if I could come to you, we've heard about Capital Markets Union. I like to tell this story. In 2014, I had just started in the Martin Centre. My wife just moved over from Ireland. She was 7 or 8 months pregnant. It was a stressful time, and my first event for the Martin Centre was how to realise Capital Markets Union by 2020. So here we are. My daughter is starting secondary school next year, and I don't think we are any closer. But at the Martin Centre, we're kind of saying two things. Basically, what the other speakers were saying, we need to refocus on a couple of really strategic topics. And the second thing is that a shortage of money is not actually Europe's problem, because it really annoys me when people say, we don't have the money to spend on this, we don't have the money to spend on that. If we spend more on defence, we'll have to cut social security. But like literally there's trillions of euros just lounging around in every member state that is not fully utilised. So I'm just wondering, I think, one of the key issues you've highlighted in your writing is that there's an actual kind of lower rate of return on investment in Europe compared to, the United States. So I'm just wondering what would you advise to kind of tackle that problem?
That's, I think, a very big question, because, as you say, there's no shortage of private money, private savings in Europe. There's a shortage of public money in a certain sense, but there's a lot of it, but it gets spent already. So to top it up with something for Ukraine is difficult, right?
Yeah.
But coming back to the private sector savings, there I would say that maybe the Capital Markets Union is second order. And let me explain why. So if you look at the overall rates of investment in Europe, they have been equal or higher than that in the United States for 25 years, right? That's the figures are very clear. But the return have been much lower, right? And the question is why?
Yeah.
Now, this has partly to do with the way our financial systems work, which is bank-centric and based on credits. And our policy has always been, let's get the interest rate on credits a little bit down from 2.8 to 2.7 or 6, and then maybe we get somewhat more investment.
Yeah.
You will get, but investment that yields 2.6%.
Yeah.
Right? What we are lacking in Europe is more risk capital, equity capital, and then in your area, venture capital to some extent. Why do we lack that? People talk about financial education and so on. I think that is correct to some extent, but only to some extent. And that is because we have social security systems, which are all through the state. Mm-hmm. We have some countries in Europe, smaller countries usually, Holland, for example, Denmark, Switzerland, Sweden, where we have a very strong capital market, venture capital market also. We have lots of innovation. And these are all the countries where you have at least a private pillar to the pension system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think if I have to choose between the Capital Markets Union and every country in Europe adopting, I don't know, a Dutch or a Swiss type scheme for pensions, I would go for the latter.
I agree.
Okay, good.
And for us, it's part of the package. So
Okay.
pensions proposals are part of the savings and investment union. It's basically the
Okay.
what we talked about.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just
Yeah.
getting more banks, more
Totally agree.
business.
Yeah.
So I think that is the key issue for Europe,
Yeah.
and that's 90% national,
Yes.
Yeah.
and that's where the action should be.
Yeah, and I just want to provide a bit of context. Like we have several countries in Europe where public spending as a percentage of their GDP is well over 50%, and that includes, Belgium, France, obviously. You compare that to, Australia, it's about 27%. Canada, it's about low 40s%. In Ireland, I can't comment because GDP doesn't mean anything, so who knows? But it's a very interesting point, and I think it's one I'll come back to. But I just want to bring Peter in first. Peter, what do you think from your from your side of the market? Do politicians really get it? Is there a difference between what politicians think entrepreneurs need and what entrepreneurs actually need?
I think that politicians have very limited impact on like anything, or and I think also, I mean, the easy part is always like the money, and let's like throw money at the problem, and that is like if you look at now what we've been doing in EU, so we throw money at like Eastern Europe, and we're turning Eastern Europe into Africa. That you can't do anything without who's going to give the money, so it's like cancer. So I think that public funding is very dangerous, and I mean it's very easy to let's throw some money at the problem and hope it goes away. It doesn't go away, and I think that of course it's great if we get the capitals market sorted and like all of this stuff. Very, very important, but it doesn't matter if we don't have the right mindset. And I think that is the biggest problem that we have in Europe, that it's kind of like we're like a football team, and we've already lost the game, even we already started, because like the Americans and the Chinese, and like how can we compete, because like we're Europeans. We use our like Europeanness as an excuse for not being successful. This is something that has to stop. And then when we look at like what we have actually achieved, I mean, you look at Ilkka. He started this little company called Supercell, most successful games company ever, and it's based in Helsinki, in Finland. Last time I checked, Helsinki, it's in Europe. Or you look at Daniel. He started this little company. Many of you have probably heard about it, Spotify. Where did he start it? In Stockholm. It's in Sweden. It's in EU. So it seems like Ilkka and Daniel, just to name two successful European entrepreneurs, the EU and Europe didn't manage to kill them or stop them from being successful. So clearly you can be successful in Europe. Clearly you can win, the football match. So I think that the mindset is really like super important. And actually, reason we started Slush. So Slush, that if you haven't been there, you should come and check it out, because it's the biggest and best startup event on the planet. This year we had over 6,000 startup founders from all over the planet, from the US, from China, from like everywhere, and we had over 4 trillion. So that's like 4,000 billion. It's a lot of money in venture capital. Biggest gathering of venture capital any given time anywhere on the planet, and this was in Helsinki in November, in the EU, in Europe. So we started Slush back in 2008, and the reason we started that was that I gave a talk to 600 students at Aalto University in 2007. And I was talking about, my own entrepreneurial journey. I started, like at the original tech startup, the Bill and Dave started in the garage in Palo Alto in California, and Silicon Valley happened and all of that. So then I was talking about all of this, and then I asked the students, how many of you are going to start a company or join a startup, once you graduate or even before? Out of 600 students in Helsinki, in 2007, 3 raised their hand. Everybody wanted to go and work for Nokia, Kone, Wärtsilä, one of the big corporations, maybe some even for the government. And there's nothing, and I have to be clear, there's nothing wrong with that. We need people who, maintain the status quo.
Yes.
But if the young people are all about, let's get a good job and maintain the status quo, they're not doing what young people need to do. Young people are there to change the world. That's what they need to do. And how do you change the world? You start companies, to fight climate change, or, like better banking services, or, make games. So that's why we started Slush. We needed to change the mindset. And now if you then fast forward to today, so Slush, about 20,000 people come there from 160 countries and all that. But the biggest and best startup event on the planet is run by young people. We had 1,700 young people from 60 countries. They make Slush happen. They build the event. You do that for a year, 2, 3 years. You learn how to build the biggest and best startup event. And after that, you go out and you build the biggest and best startups. Like Mickey Hughes to run Slush. Then he started Volt, and now, 7 billion, exit. And, you see these Volt things, all over the, Europe and planet. But the thing is that we now achieved what we set out to do. So there was a study a couple of weeks ago in Finland that now more than half of the young people in Finland want to start a company. And again, if you look at then the results, we have in what I call the finest Bay Area, Finland, Estonia, Sweden, we have the highest number of startups per capita, we have the highest number of unicorns per capita, and we have the highest amount of venture capital invested into local startups per capita in the world. So we are winning. We are beating the US. China doesn't have a chance against us, authoritarian regimes where you can't disagree with the great leader without being, sent to some forced labor camp or alligator Alcatraz. So the thing is that Europe is winning, but we don't know it yet. Everybody wants to be European. So it comes back to the values.
Yes.
But the thing is that we have to stop using this Europeanness that, I'm from Europe, so I'm a loser, I can't achieve anything. And if I was in the US, I would be very successful.
Yes.
Bullshit.
And it's true because there's a new paper out today. I just saw the headline looking at the world's most successful quantum computing clusters. And the top 3 are in Europe, 2 in the UK and one in Helsinki.
Yeah, exactly. So, what's the problem?
Yeah. So, Zanetta, I'm thinking then from your role, to help kind of facilitate and accelerate this, doesn't the EU need really just kind of almost to do what it should do best, which is to go back to being very boring, cutting obstacles in the single market, focusing on allowing businesses do business across 27, 28 member states. Because, in my view, that wasn't the main point on the agenda, prior to the last European elections.
Well,
maybe I'm being harsh,
First, I have to still come back to the previous speaker and rebut his point on Eastern Europe being flooded with money, because it is especially in Eastern Europe that you have tons of non-subsidized innovation.
Yeah, true.
So like Estonia, if you look at Poland and drones and Polish economy, frankly, we cannot call it a subsidized economy, yes. The same if you look at laser industry in Lithuania, etc., etc. So let's shift this image from Eastern Europe receiving only cohesion funding.
All of Europe has like same
I think
kind of
if
problem.
there are problems, there are more problems in Western than Eastern Europe, to be honest.
No, Eastern Europe is like a bright spot
economic
on that.
point of view.
Agree.
Yeah.
Also, you see it in growth rates. Just check out the growth rates, and we see where the structural problems are. So, rebut on Eastern Europe.
True.
Then, speaking about the single market, of course, the European Commission now is having it on agenda. We are working on this 28th regime for specifically like innovative companies. So the scope will be pretty limited to start with, just to give this proposal a chance. Because as you mentioned, there are also very strong national interests of let's say, how to put it politically correct, not going too fast with deepening single market, especially in services.
Yes.
Yes, so I would tend to agree to what you said, that this type of basic project, just make life for businesses easier, and also kind of make it easier for companies to expand and grow up in Europe. This indeed sounds kind of boring on day-to-day basis. Yeah, it's not like a huge headline you can sell or ribbon you can cut, right? Yeah. So in that sense, I agree with you that perhaps we lack drive on these fundamentals that are kind of boring daily effort, just to provide fundamental conditions for foundational conditions. And I'm also a little bit, maybe a message on caution also on simplification agenda. We put this objective of simplifying life for companies, like administrative reporting and administrative costs, by 37.5 billion a year by the end of this mandate. With today Omnibus, we have, let's say, formally overreached 10 billion of kind of cost, less cost in administrative burden. But you see, we still need to keep going for the next 4 years if we want to see a meaningful result from this agenda, something that businesses would actually feel. And so there I also feel that this simplification agenda is a very good candidate to be somewhere placed next to single market or next to capital market, where we are kind of Sunday simplificators. Yeah, like we all believe in simplification, but we don't do enough, or we don't have the necessary drive to bring it forward.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I want to ask Dirk and Daniel quick follow-up questions, and then I'll open up for some questions, and before we get back to the debate. Dirk, maybe if I could ask you like a very political question, which is, we've got to a situation now where the EPP is very well represented around the council table, head of the commission, head of the parliament, etc. So, there is a pressure to deliver before 2029.
Well, we can't blame anyone else anymore, can
exactly, yeah.
I mean,
that's
no,
yeah.
we're on the line there. And that's why also the pressure is so high. And I think just restricting ourselves to vertical simplification in specific sectors is not enough. I think one of the problems we have, and maybe this is also connects with the mentality issue, we talk a lot about sectors that are in trouble. Cars, chemicals, all the heavy industry, basically. And that's very much a losing narrative. And we're spending a lot of time in trying to protect them. And rightly so, because some things are simply needed in the next crisis to be able to make stuff that are important. Steel, one of the important ones as well. But then, what do we do with services? I think we've stopped talking about services. And the fact that we are so careful about this 28th regime shows already how delicate this issue is. But if the IMF, and recently Lagarde also in the Econ committee says, so on goods we have this internal tariff inside the EU, and we still call it a single market, and it's more than 50% internal tariff. We should be very careful using the word single market if we have a 50% internal tariff. On services, it's more than 100%, yes? So the fact that we still tap ourselves on the shoulder and saying that we have this single market and it's the biggest achievement ever, well, honestly, we are simply not ambitious enough. And that's why, besides the vertical simplification, and yes, we can go on with that, but honestly, also in the political polarization, it's not going to help sort of the center sort of get together and move forward on a horizontal agenda of integrating the services in the internal market.
Yeah, and it's interesting then, because it ties in. I get very worried when I hear, there's a lot of debate in Brussels, very vocal voices about, we need to protect our democracy, etc., etc. All that is, is very rational. But the last U.S. presidential election, I would say the Brexit referendum, I would say.
But it's so frustrating. Why? The
Yeah.
Brits' narrative on the regulations was already there. Huh?
Yeah.
The Brexit campaign was run on overregulation, also the migration stuff, but a lot on the overregulation. Did
Yeah.
we really learn from that?
No.
No. And,
Yeah.
and then the second point on the services, to finish that. Sometimes I just talked to a leading group of Greek retailers. I'm working on the customs reform, which we call ourselves a customs union. There is no such thing as a customs union in Europe. Everything is national. Yeah. And they're being flooded by the Chinese platforms. And they all think that their competition is with China and with the US. But then if you talk to the political leadership, they're competing with each other in Europe.
Yeah.
So the politicians in Europe are competing with each other, while the businesses are competing with China and the US and other places in the world. And this is a huge mentality gap
Yes.
in terms of what are we dealing with. And I see it this evening. We will be in the negotiations on the customs reform. The member states will try to block each other out from creating real European solutions.
Yeah.
And all the retailers outside that are literally dying because of massive amounts of products, non-compliant products coming onto the internal market.
Yeah.
And there is a big gap in sort of understanding what the real problem is between the business side of things and the political side of things.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I think it's becoming, at least as I read it, it's becoming apparent that Luxembourg, Ireland, Cyprus have been quite successful in blocking current proposals for single supervision of capital markets. So yeah, as you say, we have a long way to go. Daniel, one thing I wanted to follow up with on you is banking union. It's very interesting in Brussels because there's a limited pool of political capital to kind of get things done. And I saw it, for real up close when Draghi came out in 2012 or 2014, whenever, and said he was, do whatever it takes to save the euro. The political will for further economic reforms on the fiscal side just completely evaporated, because it had been such a bruising financial crisis that nobody wanted to press ahead with finally finishing the final strand of banking union. But do you think you say we need kind of like a less bank-centric system, but isn't like the crux of the problem really political? Like, until there is a German chancellor who signs off on an Italian bank buying a German bank, then really, we're going to just be sitting around tables here talking about what we need to do.
First, let me reply first
Yeah.
on the banking union, then something on
Yeah.
the internal market, which is very important. On the banking union, that's a solution to a problem we no longer face. In 2014, the banks were weak, very much related to the sovereign, right? And there was and then that's why we also got the banking supervision, the common supervisors, because people realized it's not so much the regulation, but the actual implementation. And that has worked very well. If you talk now to the big banks, they say, nice, right? So you said about the German chancellor to signing up. My view is we should have a situation where he doesn't have to be sign up. He's not asked, right? Where it just happens. I mean, I think we are not that far, right? And what happens now is, of course, that in many takeovers, the victim says, I don't want to be taken over, so I do whatever the other guy wanted me to do, I do it myself.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what's happening with Commerzbank. So I must say, I don't care much whether the two banks go together or not. But the key thing is, I think legally, the German chancellor has nothing to say there. And if UniCredit is just willing to pay, they should get it. Right?
Exactly.
So I think this is much more because bankers say, yes, can I do something against the will of Berlin, even if it's indirect, because they could put you are supervised by the ECB. In principle, you can
Yeah.
say bye-bye Berlin. That's on the banking union.
Okay.
On the internal market, I have to defend it. The IMF numbers are wrong. I would say 90% wrong. And we have done our own research, and there's independent research on that, and that concurs that the IMF numbers about this 40%.
So the Draghi numbers are wrong.
I'm talking the IMF numbers.
Oh, because it was in there. He referenced it as well, so I guess he checked it.
No, that was not checked. There are several numbers in Draghi report which are not correct, but that's okay. But that's, I'm just somebody who goes for numbers, right? I just don't accept political statements. But this is academic studies. There are many academic studies of the degree to which trade within the EU is at the level you would expect relative to trade with the rest of the world, given that we have an internal market. And sorry, no, it's not 44%. Some say 4, some say 10, but right. And for services, it's a bit more. But as we all know, services are extremely difficult to measure. Right. Give you an example. I know somebody who has done a fintech startup, let's say in one Northern European member country, very successful. He wants to expand to Southern European one, and he doesn't get an answer to his request to get a license. You can say that as a 1,000%, right? That's part of the banking union. And that's part of the reality that whenever you touch consumers, national consumer protection is national.
But if there's an installation of a washing machine, for example, by a company in the Netherlands, he drives over half an hour to to a German client. Yes, he will need 3 forms from the German authorities, and then he picks up the old washing machine and he takes it back home. He's exporting waste at that moment. He needs a waste exporting authorization. I mean, the numbers, we can dispute them, but we know everyday examples of barriers to trade for the most simple business to the most complex ones. And this is something that Europe should deal with if we're really serious about the economy.
That's true, but okay, in the overall picture of things, right, where the mass production is, I can guarantee you, I would say in the single market for goods, the remaining trade barriers are of secondary importance. In service, it's extremely, I think in your area, internet services, AI for business, it's a global market, right? And there's no problem with the internal market. So in these the markets where we would like our entrepreneurs to go to, the washing machines are important for everything. I agree, right? But if you want to do something AI or whatever, apart from the AI Act,
just a detail.
Just a detail. That's business to business. You see, business to business, it's not so much a big deal. Business to consumer, it's hell.
Okay, interesting. I'm going to open up for questions. We've about 20 minutes left. I've got a few that came in on social media. So if anybody has a comment or a question, just raise their hand. I see one here and another there. We can start with those two.
Thanks. Thanks, Viet Novotny from the Martin Center. Just go back to the question of simplification. Just to ask a couple of volunteers on the panel, if we were to put an estimate figure of an increased economic growth, if the simplification agenda gets implemented, what would it be? Would it be a 0.1% higher economic growth over the next 3 years? Would it be 0.5, 1%?
0.
Yes, I do not have such figure. We are more measuring really the cost of administrative burden. So it's more in absolute figures. Like, for instance, today, these 8 omnibus packages, and I agree, these are sectorial, they have generated about 10.5 billion of savings per year to companies. So that's how we work with it.
That's 1/10 of 1 percentage point of GDP.
Okay, but
level.
But the goal of that, the goal was not to economic growth. It was to provide, to basically, as the legislator, to do our job better and to have effective legislation which doesn't cost a ridiculous amount of money to implement, and because there is, of course, investment space issues within companies, within certain sectors. So I understand fully and I support the simplification. It's just that from a horizontal economic point of view, the big fish are somewhere else, and that is, I think, the important thing.
Okay, and we have one more question over here, I think, to gentlemen.
And behind you.
Perfect, thanks. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you very much. Yanis Vogtmanis from Turquoise Venture Capital. I'd like to enter a little bit the value of capital markets union, banking union, and using an example which is perhaps similar to the washing machines. If we are London-based, we are investors. We are working together with my friend Alexandros in Munich, who is private equity, and partner in Paris. And we have found in Niederschleißheim somebody we would like to invest in. And we can between us, there are no issues. We know how we work between us. So you don't have to regulate us or tell us what to do. But when we get to talking to the Sparkasse in Niederschleißheim, which has money laundering rules, yes, which has another, so actually we imagine, but perhaps that's the wrong logic, that Capital Markets Union would actually resolve all that because there would be one set of rules across Europe, and we wouldn't have to explain, and the poor bank manager in Niederschleißheim wouldn't have to phone Frankfurt and ask questions. So what Daniel Gross especially, perhaps, on this.
Daniel, on that point, I totally agree with you. That is just over-regulation, which is actually global, and a lot of it is done for fear of American reactions. And that is, I think, where we get a European money laundering agency.
AML, yeah.
AML, right?
AMLA.
So that is
Frankfurt.
So I'm not confident. I'm hopeful that this should be resolved.
Okay, but nevertheless, we imagined that the Capital Markets Union would provide a frame so that any local bank, anywhere in Europe, in Riga, wherever, would actually feel happier, feel more comfortable with us appearing with our several millions and investing in a local company. We imagine.
But I would add that my Commissioner Dombrovskis, he has also tried to tackle this, what we call regulatory overreach by ESAs, so by supervisory agencies, because it's true, one is like level 1 rules, and then how they are translated by supervisors. And now the 3 supervisory agencies are actually running their own simplification exercises, and we are, let's say, keeping heat and pressure on that as well, if it helps.
It is also something for the legislator, because what we underestimate is the how EU law and the vagueness and the vagueness of it creates legal uncertainty down the food chain. Yes. And lawyers will always be conservative, and so some people will just simply say AI Act, like Apple does. They have features on AI that they do not sell in Europe, and they're standard in the US, in US products. Why? Because legal simply tells the sales department, we're not selling that there because there's a legal uncertainty. So we also, the way we make laws is so compromise oriented that we give everyone a bit, but then you get so much vagueness and gray areas, and that innovators don't have time, founders don't have time to wait for the ECJ to sort of have a conclusion on a certain article of a law. And this really is something that we need to work on. I don't have a solution on it because unfortunately it's the way the sausage is made here in Brussels, but it's a key issue that is stopping also innovation, I believe.
Yeah, and I think just that gentleman's question reminds me that, personally, I think Brexit was a disaster for EU financial services policy and for the single market. And I think, remember those post-Brexit days when we were told, Paris was going to emerge as a global financial centre to rival London. The amount of expertise that sits in London 2 hours on the Eurostar from here is expertise we could badly use at the moment. Peter.
Thank you very much. Dirk, you spoke about the big fish. I would like to talk a bit about the millions of little fishes, meaning small and medium-sized enterprise. I'm not talking about the startup, but the large chunk of it. I just finished a study where I looked a bit into the problems of taking up digital innovations, and one of the findings is that it is on the microeconomic level, on the managerial level, that we lack a lot of skills to make new business models. The drag in low productivity is already also originating from that a large part of our business is simply not innovating because they lack these knowledges to integrate new technologies, for example, in their business models.
Okay, thanks. Would anybody like to take that, Peter?
I think it's very, very true. and again, where we can create economic growth is, of course, not just, okay, let's save all these big, like car manufacturers and whatnot, but actually, if we can make our small and medium-sized companies a lot more productive, and of course, that's by technology. And in order to use the technology, you actually need to know what you're doing. So we come to education. So then, and that is again one area where we're very strong. If you look at Europe in general, so I mean we have some kind of consensus that education is important, and we're not like anti-science like some people across the pond. But so I think that that is one area where we should do a lot more, and we should make it easier then for these companies and the leadership there to get access to the skills that they need. So I think that education is not just, okay, that let's educate our young people. We, of course, need to do that, but also we shouldn't leave, like slightly older people running these companies behind. So I think there's a lot to do there. And there are actually people who are addressing that on the private sector. So I think that there's big growth opportunity.
Yeah, and Daniel,
I would add that companies will adjust and will take up new technology if it pays for them.
Yes, true.
If they are in competition. Our industrial sector, which has global competition, they have no choice.
Exactly.
Right? The medium-sized enterprise, especially in the so-called non-tradable sector, they have much less competition. Also, if you are in Europe, to adopt new technologies would mean maybe you have to fire some people.
Yes.
And if you can't fire anybody, it doesn't pay to use new technology. Right? So this doesn't mean we have to take over the US model, right? But we have examples in Europe of countries where easy hire, easy fire, right? Famous Danish flex security and variants of that.
Yep.
So I think the general approach should be, we are now in a situation where the pressure for change across industries and within industries, what products, is extremely strong, and we need to have a more flexible model, a different model from the one when we were just catching up producing more cars every year, right? Or more machines of a certain type. And that means we have to revisit perhaps some of the employment protection legislation, which is national. I repeat, not following the American model, but see how we can combine flexibility at the level of the enterprise with security for the individual. So as the Danish model says, not guaranteeing industries, but guaranteeing or helping everybody, every individual, to have the potential to get a decent job. But getting away from, I think you said that, always protecting the losers. Because that we end up in a museum.
I think for the Martin Center, discuss or thinking about misappropriation of social protection. Is an interesting path, because I think a lot of people in the founder and innovative environment, they're not the losers of the labor market, And if they lose a job simply because an innovation just stops or because the plan failed, you go on to the next thing. And that was one of the main issues. Why are a lot of European founders in San Francisco? It has to do with labor laws. It has to do with, Dirk, if I have 4 people and one of them is not functioning or not part of the mission anymore, then I lose 25% of my capacity. And that's simply not possible for a startup. And then I need to deal with that. In Europe, it's almost impossible. And these are not people that will never get a job again.
Yeah.
You know, and so we need to have those discussions also because of demographic change. To be honest.
Yeah, and I think it's very important. I just want to provide a bit of context because the inflexibility of the labour markets and the level of social security in continental Europe relative to the English-speaking world really shocked me when I got to Belgium first, and I can provide a very concrete example. In, say, Belgium, I work on a Belgian employment contract. It's the classic Bismarckian system. You know, if Tommy fires me tomorrow because I'm a terrible economist, maybe, I'm not even sure if you're allowed to do that. There might be, most likely not. You know, I will get, yeah, we can try, yeah. I will get like 55, 60% of my salary for 6 months, then whatever, another 50%. If I'm in the very same job in Ireland, which is an EU member, and I lose my job, it doesn't matter if I'm on 20,000 euros a year or 250,000 euros a year. I get a flat rate, you know, American-style model, British model of like 250 euros a week. So it creates incentives. It's all about incentives. Society is about incentives. And currently, like, there are very little incentives in a lot, particularly Western Europe, for people to innovate, to be entrepreneurs. It just doesn't pay when you have social security systems structured as they are. But the political question is, that surely would be politically toxic. And look at France. And we're not talking about like, the English-speaking world looks at France and thinks, my God, they're stuck in the 1960s, which is probably the last time that they ran a balanced budget.
Well, I guess if every day a bigger part of the population is in pension, and every day the labor shortage is going up.
Yes.
So if there is not an ideal moment at some point where we can talk about this stuff, because actually not finding a job is almost impossible if you're ready to move for a job. That is, there are of course certain conditions, and again we are protecting also from my Christian democratic tradition and the social market economy, we protect the weakest, the most vulnerable. But I'm talking about the group that is not weak and not vulnerable, totally mobile and able to actually change jobs. And I think we've also gotten used, again, we're getting back to the mentality here and our own resilience, how to deal with uncertainty. Maybe in a couple of weeks I don't have a job anymore. And then I'll just find a new one. And I think younger generations are way more used to that kind of uncertainty than the older generations think.
Yes.
And in that sense, I think there's an opportunity, a political opportunity also to actually talk about this.
Yeah, and I have to say, it's one of the unrecognized factors. The focus is always on taxation or whatever, but it's one of the one of the key drivers why so much US investment still goes to either London or Dublin. It's because of the labour market, and it's because of the flexibility. And you know, Google in Dublin is full of continental Europeans working there, and the world doesn't end because they're not on a Belgian employment contract.
True.
But, you know,
don't tell the Belgian labour unions.
Yes, well, well, the Belgian Treasury needs every euro I can get at the minute. Yeah. But I think do we have one more question? Yes, please go ahead.
I have a small question.
Yeah.
Some comments today seem to oppose success, money, and European values as if economic ambition were somehow incompatible. Yet, for a company to succeed, you don't only need capital and money, you need talent. And maybe you need some stable institutions, stable all you are talking about. And then my question is, how could we make that EU promote an economic culture where these are not opposites, because they are complementary? And when you are talking about simplification, I followed the digital legislation since '94. There, simplification is needed because never the legislator understood digital, what was digital, and the reason you mentioned it was because they were advised by lawyers. And the European regulation is a battle between innovators, technological innovations, and the Asian corporation of lawyers. And that's it. And now you come to simplification. And
Yeah, well, I think actually it's a very good question. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I can wrap up. I can give the speech.
So I think that's the most important thing, people. I mean that is kind of like should be very, very clear. And you're absolutely right. I mean, if you look at our demographics across Europe, we're not getting younger. That's like rule like biology. But the thing is, what we have and why I believe that we are winning, as Europe, is because of the values. I mean, this is something that it's very, very good to look at. Like if you look at now what is happening in the U.S. And when you talk to people who don't look like American, they're scared like every day that these crazy ICE people will like arrest them and then they'll wake up in Alcatraz or something like that. So you realize then the importance of these values that, I mean, without freedom you have nothing, and we're so used to it that of course, and like we have all of these things, but we can't take them for granted. And now we have kind of like a perfect storm because there are so many talented people who, like again, realize that, maybe I could live somewhere else and I don't want to be scared like every day. It's a little bit like what happened during the pandemic, for people, rich people in Shanghai, that I can't leave my apartment for 8 weeks. Like what kind of freedom is this? So they were like happy when, living standards, everything were going up, but then they realized that, hey, I'm locked up and I can't do anything and I have all the money in the world, but, can't do anything. Yeah. So I think that what we should focus on is attracting the best and the most talented people. They shouldn't go to San Francisco. I mean, they should stay here in Europe. They can go to like any of our nice cities and they can build fantastic companies here and then they can enjoy the European values. So we need to talk a lot more about our values because that's what's important. And you realize, when you don't have access to that maybe, you need to rethink.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And we've probably taken it for granted for a very long time. Sinead, any final words? What would be the one kind of message you'd like to leave people from the panel today?
I would completely second this idea that Europe is very attractive precisely because of values, and we shouldn't underestimate this attractiveness. And actually, if there was one true thing in national security strategy, US national security strategy, then I fully concur that Europe lacks self-esteem and self-confidence.
Yes.
That was absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think maybe that in an economic context, that Central and Eastern Europe have an important role to play as well, because I think if you look at the reforms, the EU-mandated reforms that the former communist countries went through in the 1990s, I think and later, there's a lot of valuable lessons there for a Western Europe that is, almost impossible to reform both politically or economically. Poland is a very clear example of an economy that's
and
growing.
in Poland, they understand that if we don't fight Russia in Ukraine, we'll fight them in the streets of Brussels.
Yes, exactly. Daniel, any last musings?
I think our self-esteem would have a much stronger backing or base if we didn't stifle a lot of entrepreneurial talent that we have at home.
Yes.
So I think we have people, I think technically well prepared, but as we discussed earlier, there's legislation or rules, I think 90% national, perhaps 10% EU, that stifles the application of innovation, the development of new industries, and the running down of old ones. And I think that is what we need to think about now, especially given the new geopolitical context. That's, I think, where we put a lot of emphasis politically.
Okay.
So in fact, and I totally agree, in Europe, yes, we might need some omnibuses, but where we need a whole fleet of omnibuses is in the member states.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is where the actual simplification will make a real big difference in the lives of innovators. And when it comes to the attractiveness of Europe, just look at all the successful people from other continents. Where do they try to get a passport? Yeah, where do they try to live? Where
Yeah.
do they send their kids to school? Yes, it's a lot of the time it's Europe.
Yeah.
So I'm not at all one of the fatalists of our European identity at all. I think we are one of the best places in the world, and it's only for us to lose, and that is basically what the next decade is about.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think
Yes.
that's a nice way to wrap up this panel. I want to thank all our speakers taking their time. Taking the time today. I know they're very busy because it's coming up to Christmas. For those speakers who travelled from outside, thank you for your questions. Thank you. Thank you for. I think it was an interesting discussion. And with that, I would like to pass back to Alicia.